Welcome to the Michigan Realty Business Podcast, where we discuss everyday business concepts with local Michigan entrepreneurs and business owners. I'm Jeff Rutledge, founder of MichiganRealty.org and licensed realtor with Signature Sotheby's in downtown Birmingham, Michigan. Today, my guest is Michael Koory. Michael is somebody who truly understands the art of sales. He is the senior partner of Helix Sales Development in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Sales is one of the most critical elements to any business, and not understanding sales will certainly put your business on the wrong path to success. Today, you're going to learn about the 6 steps, the 6 very simple steps to understanding sales communication: intro, short story, presentation, close, and rehash. And you're also going to learn how these ideas are applied in reality. But before I begin, I would like to emphasize that this conversation is separate from my practice as a realtor here in the state of Michigan. It is, however, part of my desire to uplift Michigan and business owners that make our community a place that we call home. Now, without any further delay, let me please introduce Michael Koory. So, thank you for being here today, Mike. It's a pleasure to speak with somebody who's also in sales.
Yeah, glad to be here. And I love talking sales. So this should be fun.
Well, let's just get into it. Okay.
Okay.
What is sales?
What is sales? I think at its root, it's human interaction. You know, it's one person trying to see if they have the means to help another person solve a problem that they may or may not have identified that they have. In most cases, people know something's wrong when they seek out a salesperson, but sometimes not. So I like to look at it as solving problems for somebody else. Right.
Yeah, I think maybe at the core of a salesperson is a problem solver. Right.
It should. Yeah. If it's not, it should be because there's certain transactional things, right? So I'm speaking in the complex B2B world. You have to be a problem solver. Right. Otherwise you're just, pitching people, which, nobody likes that.
That's true. I mean, when you say pitching people, I instantly think of just spam messages on LinkedIn or.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, just like that, very direct. There's no real rapport being built.
Right.
And I don't know if that's sales. I think a lot of people think that's sales, but I don't know if that's sales.
Well, yeah. Sales is such a broad category. It probably gets put under there, but that's the same as all the negative stereotypes. That just it perpetuates the negative stereotypes of what people don't want. They don't want to be just whether it's verbal spam or in your inbox or in your LinkedIn, you accept a request and then, you trigger an automated flow of, meet me, let's talk. I know this, blah, blah, blah. And, none of it is really oriented to try to solve the problem. There's a certain amount of outreach and there's a certain amount of cold prospecting that you have to do as a salesperson. But you need to approach that from trying to solve a problem for somebody. And if they don't have the problem, then you got to be willing to say, great, nice to meet you and, move on down the road. But just to, the constant barrage of me type selling is what nobody likes.
Yeah, of course. And then you get into this, I've got a second question for you, but then you get into this game where businesses start to identify a salesperson as an account manager or as a business developer. Right. Or they try to then create some label that isn't as off-putting as the word salesperson. Right. Yeah. Which from a strategic standpoint, I think makes complete sense. And it's not a bad idea.
Right.
But I think that's the creation of those terms comes from the negative stigma of a salesperson.
Yes. It also stems from, I've seen it also stem from a misunderstanding of the role that needs to be done or the role that they need the person to do to achieve the goals of the business. So, an account executive can be somebody that is managing a defined set of accounts and just needs to keep ongoing business, all the way to somebody that's a pure hunter and trying to, uncover new businesses and pretty much everything in between. So, and a lot of it starts with, you ask what is sales. A lot of it then boils down to, well, what work needs to be done to advance the business? What problems are we really well suited to solve for what type of people that have those type of problems? And that's where a lot of it gets lost too, because then you end up, trying to, put one role or one type of person in a role that they may or may not be properly suited for.
That's interesting. So you're saying that there may be multiple forms of sales that might suit a certain personality, but then other forms of sales might not suit personalities. And so you look at sales from maybe a dualistic sense, in the sense that there's a customer to business relationship, and then there's a business to business relationship. And one thing that I noticed about your specialty is that you focus on business to business relationships. So What's the difference between that customer to business relationship versus that business to business relationship?
Well, so, B2C, which I'm not an expert in, but, the easiest example is, retail type sales, which is, changed dramatically because they, do the thing that we always do. We walk into a store and someone walks up and says, "May I help you?" And we say, what do we say?
Well, yeah. What are you looking for?
Yeah.
Or
no,
hey, I'm
no,
looking for this particular thing. Or what do you,
Or no, I'm just looking, And
that's true too. Yeah. I actually do. I am very forward with salespeople. So I actually give them an honest response. I say, yeah, I'm looking for, this USB chip that I can't find anywhere. Can you help me out? Do you have it? I'm usually drilling them with so many questions that they usually respond, well, I have no idea.
And we don't sell that here.
But you are right. I think, I guess I was having a brain fart there. Yeah, I guess the common response is, no, I am just looking. I think you're right.
Right. And so that I classify that as the B2B. The business to business is where there's a representative of the business that may or may not have a problem. We deal with, CEOs and VPs of sales in our world. So we're trying to identify those that have the desire and commitment to want to make changes in their sales organization. So we go looking for that because we have a defined, don't want to sound like a movie, but we have a defined set of skills that, we take to try to help uncover what those issues are and then, find a way to solve the problem for them. So that's the way I see, the B2B role. And, you could be, if you worked in a Porsche dealership and you were astounding at customer service and you could really help uncover the persona of the buyer that comes in to buy a Porsche or any, any sort of capital, you could do extremely well. And that would still be a valuable type of sales. But in our world, we focus on the business to business. Those two organizations are where we define our work.
So obviously I'm in real estate. And so to a certain degree, a lot of my work is B2C or C2B, however you want to, prioritize it. Mm-hmm. And in another, perspective, it's also B2B. But
sure.
But does that distinction really matter? Let's take real estate, for example. Does that distinction of knowing that, oh, this is a B2C client versus this is a B2B client, does that change the strategy, the way that you communicate, or is it all fundamentally the same?
I think at its root, it should all be the same, because if I were, can I share an example of a bad real estate salesperson that I worked with?
Yeah.
So I was in marketing at the time, and we were getting relocated from St. Louis to Massachusetts. And we were working with a real specialist. So, we had a real estate agent that had a pretty easy job there. It was guaranteed money because we were going to buy a house because we had to move. So there was an established need there was a commitment and a desire on my part to get this transaction done. I added a few layers because and I'm going to date myself, but I faxed the guy, 14 pages of exactly what I was looking for. And more importantly, exactly what I did not want.
Right.
And we had a young daughter at the time. I knew I was going to be traveling a ton. I listed this guy everything. And I said, I got this defined set of time. I'll fly out there. I'm going to buy the house. My goal is to find one and buy it, in the weekend. So I get there. The guy picks me up, go to the very first house. We pull up in front. I look at the house. I look at him. I'm like, I point. I'm like, that's number one on my list, what I did not want to see.
Right.
So immediately there, if we think of a sales case, I was motivated. I had desire, I had commitment, I had a goal, I had laid it all out for him. And the first thing that this guy did was violate what I said I wanted. So, if you look at the buying process from taking the client from where they are all the way through to being able to close the deal, from, identifying the problem, identifying their motivation, differentiate yourself, show them a solution that's going to work, and then close the business, right up front, he totally botched it. Yeah. And that happened one more time. And then, by lunchtime, I terminated him and went and did it on my own, because he just completely paid no attention to what the needs of the buyer were in a terribly blatant way, because I took the time to actually send him exactly what we were looking for. So in that sense, there's no difference between, B2B and B2C, other than, how you categorize what the end customer is. But the process could have been and should have been the same.
Ultimately, it was a failure to listen.
Right. Exactly.
And in my perspective, sales is heavily, 90% just listening. Listening, yes. Understanding, empathizing, and then figuring out where to go from there.
Yep. Asking really good questions that, help the client see where they're at and help figure out if there's a good fit. Totally. And that's really, you're right. It's about, listening, asking questions, and figuring out if there's a fit. And then it shouldn't be, all the other things that make everybody uncomfortable. Because if you're just transparent about that, then, there's something to work with, or there's not.
So I'm actually teaching some interns through Michigan Realty, the very basics, at least what I consider to be the very basics of sales right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can dive into how I'm viewing the 5 or 6 steps of communication, and maybe you can break them down a little bit further for me. Okay.
Okay. I'll try.
I look at communication in a very cyclical way. There's micro and macro versions of this particular cycle. And it first starts off with intro. And then there's a story somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. Then there's qualifying questions, presentation, close, and rehash. Okay. But that happens repeatedly in very, like I said, a very macro sense, but it also happens in very micro ways as well in the way that people communicate. Mm-hmm. And so let's start with an intro. What's an intro? What makes a good icebreaker when we're talking sales?
Well, what would be the context of this icebreaker? Is it somebody you're calling them up cold? You're meeting them for the first time in person? You're sending them a letter. There's always going to be some sort of, are you getting introduced, which is the best way, or a referral. But I think the faster the salesperson can turn it around and find out what's important to the client right from the introduction on, mm-hmm. The better served everybody's going to be. Because, I don't want to be the guy at the party that comes up and says, "Hey, Jeff," and then just, here comes everything about Mike, and, which sends you running just like the other side of the room.
Of course. Yeah.
So that introduction, can be, "Hey, Jeff, it's Mike, me about yourself. What brought you here? Why are we meeting? What are you interested in accomplishing? What did you want to get out of this networking meeting? That introduction should turn into a question real quick to find out what's motivating for that other person. And then that can lead to story, and that can lead to, further questions and qualification and the other parts that you said. But if we're a salesperson, we need to get ourselves out of the way as fast as possible.
And are you saying the best way to do that is to just ask a question to get ourselves out of the way?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you might have to say, this is, Mike and I work with real estate professionals that are interested in growing their client base. What's important to you about real estate? And then just get out of the way, because you might say, I don't know anything about real estate, and I don't want to talk about real estate. So, go away. But most people won't do that. But
well, I find it very interesting that right after this icebreaker intro, you go right into some form of question and then into a story. Because I guess you're alluding to this idea that after the intro, you take it off of yourself, you put it on to the person you're talking to. And from that question, you're actually able to then diagnose a little bit of information that you can use in the way that you tell whatever story it is that you're going to tell.
Yeah.
But that story is important too. So what's up with the story?
Well, I want to find out, and some of this is really coming from the background. I had a long time in corporate before I went out on my own. And a lot of what happened in corporate, in fact, my partner and I just did a podcast about this, recently, revolved pitch and chase is what I called it. So I meet you, and then my story comes right out, and then try to close. And then I end up spending the next 6-9 months chasing. And story is important, but story might be more on the front end of what made you interested to have a conversation in the first place. Or it might be better suited when I understand what some of your criteria are, or what problem you're, attempting to deal with. Story is vital, because story is also what engages us.
Yeah.
But my story is not necessarily as important in a business deal. If I'm the seller and you're the buyer, my story is not as important early on until I understand where you're at, and then understand if I can even help. And then at some point further down the road, it makes great sense to bring out my story when I understand, your goals and your aspirations and your problems and what's motivating you and how you want to win and where you see it in the future. And once I understand all that, then my story makes, better sense, because then that will be the determinant for you to say, I think this guy can help me, or, no, I don't think he's the right one. But we want to vet some of that earlier on in the process.
Yeah, certainly. And this is maybe alluding to why I view that method of communication in a cyclical fashion, because very often you're revisiting a story, or you're revisiting presenting features and benefits, or you're having to try to close them in multiple different ways at different times. And you have to just keep restarting that process over again. So it's interesting how you describe it. I don't think that we're very far off in the way that we understand it. And so that's very good.
Yeah. Well, and your idea of the wheel, the cyclical, there's a really cool analogy to that HubSpot uses. The CEO for HubSpot, they don't view business as view business as a funnel. They view it as a flywheel. Because if, and this is something that, as in sales, we kind of have to challenge ourselves to look at, because something that goes through a funnel, goes in one end and it falls out the bottom. And then it, if you don't capture it, it spills all over the place. So they view their whole client interaction as a flywheel. And depending on where you enter in, you can enter in at any variety of places, but then they want to view it as a flywheel, because they want to continually have those client interactions, those discussions, those meetings continue to make it go, around and around and around. And it's a very interesting concept. So that's what I thought of when you talked about the cyclical nature. It's a very good metaphor. And I think it has value in how you view your client relationships and your client interactions, because you want to continue the conversation. You want to keep, the ball rolling or the wheels turning or the conversation moving forward.
Okay, cool. So now the next step of this entire process after story, I typically like to put qualifying questions in between story and presentation, but we've already kind of touched on questions. And so let's get into presentation. What makes a strong presentation?
Well, the way we view it is that the presentation is it's going to cast back to the client all of your capabilities in dealing with the problems that they've identified. So again, I go back to my corporate world. Presentation was always feature benefit based. And so I'd listen to what you had to say, and then I'd go, here's all my feature benefits, and here's my logo with all my NASCAR, all my logos on why I'm great. And we want to turn that and tighten that much greater so that the presentation is only in relation to those problems or those areas that the client wants to solve. So going back to my example, the house I did not want in Massachusetts was, we called it a Dunlop. It's where the top floor is bigger than the bottom floor. And they have a lot of those out east for whatever reason. We just did not like the look of the house. So that was on a no-go. So any presentation, the day of the event, which is kind of like the demo when I show up, that presentation should have been all geared toward those things I specifically told the person, the real estate agent about. Instead, he wanted to show me his NASCAR, well, here's all these great houses I have listings for. And, this is what I want to show you because this is what I have to sell you. Yeah. That would not be a good example of a presentation. A good example of a presentation would be, here's what you said on page 5, 6, and 7. So we're going to the first house here from number 5. We're going to go to the second house from page 6, and we're going to go to the other house from page 7. So the presentation should reinforce exactly back to the problems the client wanted to solve, and then how you're uniquely suited to add to be able to solve those problems for the client.
Yeah. So let's talk about something that I don't think people appreciate fully, and that is the features and benefits aspect of a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
What is features? What is benefits? Make sense of that for me.
In regards to how it's used or how it should be used, or
well, first of all, what is a feature, and then what is a benefit, and then let's talk about how those are leveraged.
So the feature. Let me try and think of a good example. So if you're buying a drill, to make it really simple, if you're buying a drill, why do you buy a drill? Why does anybody buy a drill?
Oh, because they need to drill a hole. They need to screw something in the wall.
Right.
They need to put something together.
So 3 perfect examples there. Does it put a hole in the wall? But does it have bits to be able to drive screws, or what is it that you're trying to put together? So the features are going to be, it's blue, it has variable speed. It can be what's the one that makes a ton of noise when you do it? It's like
I know what you're talking about. It like kind of pushes in.
Right. So super. Yeah. It's really aggressive. So if I'm presenting to you and you just want something that can make it easier to put together a children's playhouse, and I'm pitching you on my super powered drill that has the torque to twist steel, that's a complete misalignment, and it's focusing on my part of it. So I think one of the problems with feature and benefit selling is it ends up, I pitch to you my features and benefits, and it forces the prospect to try to sift through what about that's going to be important to me. And if I'm lucky and I happen to lay it out quickly to where the prospect can see it, then I might get the sale. But in most cases, soon on you lose them and they become disinterested because it's all about me. Whereas if you use it the other way around, where you're gearing your capabilities specifically to the problems that the client has identified are important and want to solve, then you start to see if there's fit and there's alignment based on what the outcomes are, as opposed to just pitching about, my variable speed, or this, I have this sort of set of bits that can go with it, or you could use it because it's really lightweight, so you could, work overhead. There's so many variables that you need to understand what the client's trying to do. Because if it's something delicate, I don't want to be selling them the supercharged rocket drill that, is going to twist all the, strip out all the holes.
Yeah, of course. Well, okay. So now we've laid that all out, right? And I'm loving it. Okay. And I really want to buy this drill. Now what? Now, how do you close somebody? What does that even mean? And I feel like there's a million different ways to do it. So define what is closing?
Yeah. Closing is it's the ending of one part of the conversation and hopefully the beginning of the other. My first job out of college was selling life insurance, and the closes were horrible. It was cheesy stuff. Like, you'd put the pen on the contract and, I'd tilt the contract down so the pen would fall and you'd pick it up. And they'd be like, "Oh, Jeff, while you're holding the pen, why don't you sign right here and, protect your family for the," it was terrible. Closing is really just it's the end of the qualification period and hopefully the beginning of moving forward together to solve the problem. So it's probably the most overused part of the sales process, specifically in business to business. At some point you have to get to agreement that, Jeff, does it look like I understand, the number of ways you need to use this drill? You need to use it above the head. You need to have variable speed. You want it to be able to fit well, and you need a light on the end of it. Does it look like everything that I have on this is going to solve the problem for you? If you say yes, well, then do you want my help? Would you like to buy this drill and move forward? I mean, we make too big of a deal of it because really we haven't found out what the client really needs earlier on. Most deals are won and lost due to either a really good job of discovery and qualification or a really poor job of discovery and qualification. And then you end up being at the end where it's really uncomfortable and weird because it's like, well, why are you trying to use all these closing techniques?
Yeah.
There should be no closing technique because it should just be natural moving from one part of the conversation to the next because I've taken the time to understand what's important to you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, or did I just
it totally does. Yeah, it should feel natural and it shouldn't be forced is really the cornerstone of trying to close somebody.
Exactly.
By the way, I do like that idea though of throwing the pen on the floor.
Yeah, even if the other thing we would do is you just take it and you hand it. If you put a pen out there, most times people will take it. Now it's changed a little bit because of the pandemic. Nobody wants to touch anything that anybody else touched. But no, you don't want to do that, Jeff. That's
I kind of like it. I look, there's something smooth about it that I think if it's done right, I think there's something there.
Well, I will look forward to hearing about all the great deals that you and your team do with the pen sliding off the contract.
Well, Mike, what we're going to do, we're going to purposely put a package together for your business, and I'm going to have our people do that on purpose for you. Okay.
No, my partner will probably not approve of having.
No, I'm joking. We won't do that. But that leads us to the last step, which is rehash. And some people use different terminology, but in general, I don't know if you're familiar with that term or not. But are you, Mike? Are you familiar with the term rehash?
Well, the way I understand rehash is you're bringing back up previous parts of the conversation. Is that how are you using it?
That's potentially true. It's reverting back That's really the core of the word rehash. But I guess in the sales context, the way that I've always viewed it is you're taking an existing customer who has just purchased from you and you're making them a customer again instantly, or you're getting referrals from them, or you're taking your existing database and attempting to get them to take another action of some sort.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot there, but
yeah. So re-engaging them, or getting referrals, or creating future opportunities with them.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so the way we see that is that's, you execute as flawlessly as possible. I like to say execute flawlessly, but there's nothing flawless. You're always going to stumble, but you really want to be, after you start the process of doing business, you want to exceed their expectations. And again, that comes back to asking good questions, really understanding what they want to do, making sure there's alignment. If you have multiple stakeholders, in your world, if the principal homeowners, whether it's a couple or family, are they in alignment on what they want? Or does one wants a, Frank Lloyd Wright, prairie style, and the other one's looking at colonial. Now you got trouble. And how do you sort that alignment? But the way we try to teach it is that you really want to, create a client that's not going to want to leave you, that you're adding so much value in whatever way whatever service or products you have, that they want to continue that moving forward.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I've always used rehash. I first learned that when I was doing door-to-door sales back in the day when I was younger. And what we would do is, once that person purchased whatever it was that we were selling, we would always ask them at the end, "Hey, before I leave, what about your neighbors or your friends or your family? Do you think that they would want one of these too? And would you be willing to pick one up?" And then you can always ask them to pay you back, or, whatever, right? Just some, BS statement there to soften the ask. And yeah, so I think that rehashing is a very critical step to a good sale, especially in product sales, and definitely in service sales too. If you're in an auto center, to rehash them after they get an oil change, to do a quick tire rotation, right? Something simple like that. Like, it's always happening to people and they're so used to it, but not everybody has the guts to ask for that thing at the very end.
Oh, it's rare. It's rare that people ask for referrals. Even companies that do an excellent job in selling, it's rare the ones that will ask for referrals. And it's, what we try to teach is that all the prospecting that you do on the front end, the hard work ethic, prospecting, which often, if you're first starting, involves a lot of cold calling, cold outreach, doing, the work ethic type work to build it up to the point that you have the opportunity to get referrals. And, you see the people that are really successful in the long term, they have a system of getting referrals, and the referrals are coming in, and their clients actively, refer for them, and the business begins to flow and just grow. Many people don't do that. It's rare that, someone is good at getting referrals. And if they are, they're probably super, super successful.
I love it. Mike, before we let you go today, I'm going to ask you a big jackpot question that I think a lot of business owners and individual entrepreneurs are always wondering. If they could do one thing differently today to get more sales, what should they be doing?
I would say that the number one thing that I'm seeing lately is a lack of clarity in where they're prospecting, and which then leads to not enough effective prospecting. It really, fat pipelines solve a lot of problems. And, we're seeing right now a lot of people just, their efforts are scattered, or they haven't really identified where they need to go. So they're not as effective as they could be. And, the biggest issue we often run into is that the pipelines are just not full enough because people aren't prospecting.
Yeah.
And really going into the potential recession, there's a lot of companies that have been living off of, a sales team full of order takers. And, that's been great while the economy's been roaring.
Mhm.
But as we come into where it's going to start stalling, and people are seeing it already with the supply chain, when that spigot gets turned off and there's no more orders, then you really need to be able to prospect and add value. And if that's not happening, it should get corrected right away, because depending on when and if, the recession hits, as people are talking, it's going to get challenging.
Yeah, I think so too. And those who are those order takers, they're going to have to start to learn real quick how to start to create traction by themselves, in a both an organic fashion and through maybe some paid advertising streams. And in fact, like, for example, content like this, where we're on a call having a conversation, it's not real estate related, but guess what? It works to that exact effect that you're talking about, where it taps into a new target market, and it always keeps people, thinking about Michigan Realty, Jeff, Mike Koory. There's always something going to be published. And so in that regard, that helps the long term, especially during a downtime.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that downtime doesn't last very long, and hopefully we can get back on track here. But
hopefully it's just a little bump.
Yeah, exactly.
Or non-existent. It's fine if it doesn't come either. I'd be happy either way.
I would be too. I am a bit cynical naturally. And so I tend to think that we're going to probably hit a speed bump here soon, if we aren't already going over it. Yeah. And, and hopefully our suspension is okay.
Yeah, there's enough travel between the wheels and the fenders, and you're not going to bottom out and hit too hard.
Yeah,
those
exactly.
Big gouges like you see, some of the train tracks. You go over the big bumps here in Michigan.
That's
on the other side of the train tracks, there's all the gouges in the asphalt from the.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you're an awesome salesperson. I really appreciate you coming on here today.
My pleasure.
We need to have you back on to dive deeper into the sales process. And maybe next time what we could do is talk about what I label as impulse factors. And we can dive deep into the psychology behind sales in the next episode together.
Be happy to do it. Yeah, I love both those things. Sales process and the neuropsychology part of it is fascinating. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, cool, Mike. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.